Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Chargle. Now, do not let my relaxed appearance be any indication of the severity of the topic. It is with the utmost sincerity that I bring to you a discussion on the history of the word bit as it pertains to comedy. In all my research for this, I couldn't find a consistent definition for the word bit. So today, not only will we be discussing what is a bit, but we will be crafting our own definition, and we will be settling scores along the way. It is my belief that we have become far too laissez-faire with our use of the word bit. Now, the most consistent definition I could find came from the Gag Club, which, if you're wondering of the credibility of this definition, just know it comes from a website connected to an app called the Bits app, in which people can craft their Type 5. It says, a bit is a segment of comedy that comedians deliver to entertain an audience. So, I guess you could attribute the word bit, with this definition, to, let's say, a Who's On First, a section of a comedy special. But we'll get into why I don't really like this version of the definition later. But I think in order to understand, what is a bit, we have to understand what is a joke. We're getting down to brass tacks here, people. A joke, as defined by Wikipedia, is a thing that someone says to cause amusement or laughter, especially a story with a funny punchline. Now, I think it's very important to realize that a joke doesn't necessarily have to be a duck and a rabbi walk into a bar. It can be an amusing anecdote told with color and vivaciousness to make someone laugh. But usually, a joke will follow the system of a setup and a punchline. But I prefer the system of a setup, development, then a punchline. I feel like this mimics kind of like our three-story structure in movies and TV and ballets and stuff like that. And it also mimics the story arc with the rising action and shit like that. The punchline is usually a short and quippy remark that takes the setup and leads it to an unexpected ending. In this more elementary understanding of the word bit, a bit would be a collection of jokes, if you will. A segment of comedy that is a collection of jokes. I would like to propose a new word for this phenomenon, coined by one Michael Jagdeo. Michael J. in his blog, Diary of a Stand-Up Comedian, on October 23rd, 2011. He says the word laugh train, which I think is just stupid enough to work. And it's the idea that there's a premise and a joke based off that premise. And because we had a joke off the first premise, we can have another joke off of that, if that makes sense. It's almost like a little tree diagram, if you will. But the second joke is only possible because the first joke also acts as development for the second punchline. The example he cites is Dave Chappelle talking about children's cartoons. So, it starts with the premise. Kids' shows condition us to act a certain way. Something simple. Something not inherently funny. The preliminary joke that comes off of this premise. They make the character who lives in a trash can named Oscar the Grouch. No wonder people don't care about homeless people and demonize them so much. And his big finish of that section is, get a job, you grouch. But then there's a second layer joke that comes off of it. Because he made that first joke about Sesame Street, now he can talk about all the silly characters that come along with Sesame Street. He says, I wouldn't go if I knew how to get there. Living with a 6-foot pigeon and an elephant that's a junkie and a pimp who they call the Count. And he ends it with the big shebang of his Count impression, which is just hilarious. This follows the setup, development, punchline system. There's the setup of kids' shows condition us to behave a certain way. Then there's this development of talking about Sesame Street and Oscar the Grouch and how we don't care about homeless people. And then he goes into all the zany, wacky characters. All to end with the big shebang, the big punchline of his Count impression. And he has a tagline that the Count says that I can't remember because I wrote these notes a week ago. But it's funny. I'd like to give another example of this laugh train that also follows a setup, development, punchline structure, but in an elongated form. And that would be John Mulaney's bit, laugh train, of ordering fries. Now, the setup here is I need to eat healthier. Simple enough. And then he goes into a developmental anecdote where he was out with a friend and given a choice between salad or fries. And he says, that's like deciding between going on a jog or smoking crack cocaine. And then he says, if I got a plate of crack for the table, would you have some? I know you'd have crack if I got crack. Should we do it? Should we get a plate of crack for the table? And let me tell you, whenever John Mulaney does these vague impressions of like just normal people that we all know, it's when he's at his funniest. And he goes on to say people treat ordering fries like a little adventure. And that's like our first little mini joke, our little mini punchline. But then because we had that, we have a bigger punchline. He says, it's like a bunch of couples deciding to do ecstasy together. And you can like kind of see where he got to ecstasy from I need to eat healthier. But the whole nature of this laugh train is that it all flows together. It's a train, if you will. And the preliminary jokes get the audience warmed up for the big kicker at the end. But people will ask, like, how does this laugh train differ from a bit? And from this rudimentary is the word I was searching for earlier. This rudimentary definition of the word bit, there is no difference. Like, a laugh train is just a bit. It's a segment of your comedy special. But I say there is something different. My favorite definition that I found in my research actually came from Austin Rodriguez with Vulture magazine in his think piece about bits. He says, a bit is a joke played with some sincerity. A bit is a comedic take on reality. Now, I think this is just beautiful. It's so insightful. An example of a bit that follows this definition is camouflage. Whenever someone wears camouflage, we all pretend like we can't see them. Obviously, I hate to break the fourth wall for you. You can see people that wear camouflage. But we all pretend as if we can't because we think it's funny. Whenever someone's wearing a camouflage shirt, we say, oh my goodness, you're a floating head today. Like, what's going on? Are you okay? Where are your organs? And the essence of the bit is that you are pretending that you sincerely cannot see them, when we all know you can. And upon surveying like some of my friends, they all said that the very nature of a bit is that it's somewhat reoccurring. And that it like kind of refers back to itself, and it's a little bit inside jokey. And I think the most beautiful example of this newfound definition of the word bit comes from James Acaster's stand-up comedy special Repertoire. And like, I would go as far as to say that this is a play. Like, with how detailed and meticulously he put together like the plot and like his character in this comedy special, it's divine. It is a work of art. Please go and watch it. It's a 4-part special. So in the first part, the very beginning, he comes out on stage and he gets down on his knees and he starts talking about like nothing, nonsense. Then he starts in with this developmental anecdote about how in the Olympics one year, there were these 2 figure skaters that wanted to dance to a song that was, let's say, 5 minutes long. But according to the rules, their dance could only be 4 minutes long. However, they found a loophole. The clock only started when their skates touched the ice. So for the first minute of the dance, they did it on their knees. So all of a sudden, it made sense why James Acaster was performing the first 10 minutes on his knees. It wasn't 10 minutes, I'm exaggerating. Then like after that story, he keeps talking about nothing. And then he gets so excited at one point, he stands up. And when he stands up, he starts the stopwatch on his wristwatch, making a faint and dainty but audible and very funny beep. This itself, not a bit. However, throughout the rest of this episode and the 3 subsequent episodes, anytime he sits down, he's on his knees, anytime he touches the floor, he starts and stops his stopwatch accordingly. And I just think it's so funny, and it gets a laugh every single time. Now, some would call this a callback, and there are a lot of times where callbacks and references are confused as bits, and it's kind of like squares and rectangles. No, I feel like it's more like Venn diagrams, where it's like some callbacks are bits, some bits are callbacks, but not all callbacks are bits, and not all bits are callbacks. You know what I mean? This misunderstanding, I think, is actually what inspired this video. On TikTok, there was this trend where people were talking about the bits they do in everyday life. And when I tell you, I was filled with a blind rage. I was in panic mode because these people were using and abusing the word bit. But how could they get it right when there's no consensus? There's no universal definition of the word bit. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'm here to do. My personal definition is plagiarized, completely stolen from Austin Rodriguez's in his think piece about bits for Vulture. I said, a bit is a comedic or satirical twist on reality, played with the utmost sincerity. An alternate definition would be, you know it when you see it. But let's break this down a little bit. A bit is a comedic or satirical twist on reality. I say comedic or satirical because it doesn't always have to be this, like, silly thing. I feel like with the camouflage thing, it's, like, very silly. Like, there's no consequences to, like, you pretending that your friend disappeared because they put on camouflage. But I think satirical in the way that it can also be some sort of, like, commentary. I don't know. I don't have any further insight on what I mean by that. I will refer you to my alternate definition, you know it when you see it. But it's all played with the utmost sincerity. And I think that's something that we get right in this TikTok trend is people commit to the bit. And it's like, no matter what, you will not break character. And I will say one really good example that came out of this trend was this girl who said that anytime someone's telling her, like, a secret or something, she'll, like, be like, oh, don't worry, I won't tell anyone. You got that? Isn't that fucking hilarious? Like, pretending that you are an FBI, like, almost sleeper cell agent in a way is hilarious. Like, just talking into the mic. But she also had a deeper level with this with just herself. She would imagine that her character, they are wearing a wire, but the wire isn't connected to anything. So they're just, like, clinically insane running around acting as if they're an FBI agent, which I think is hilarious. I think that's really all I have to say about bits. If I think of anything else, I'll put it in the description of the comments. My main point is we need to stop using the word bit for when it is not a bit. And we need to shy away from calling segments of comedy, calling a tight five a bit. It's not, okay? A bit it's magical, spiritual. It's entertaining, and I'm enthused whenever I think about bits. But when I see people abusing the word, it makes me sad, and it tugs on my heartstrings, and we can't do this anymore. So if you have your own definition of the word bit, please comment it down below. I'll be taking suggestions and requests, and I'll compile my favorites, and maybe in the next Chatting with Chargle, where I'm talking about nothing, I'll tell you guys my favorite. That's what we'll do. We'll have a bit definition writing contest. Best one wins. All right, see ya.